Comparable graphs for the second location, which was on the Beagle property. Same colored dots are used here. The quietest interval sound levels here range from about 35 to 50 decibels. Again, in the wind speed range when the turbine would be operating. The average sound levels and the loudest 10% of the time sound levels are kind of in this range of 45 up to 60 decibels here. Again, they're scattered, but they're for the average and peak sound levels today, but the quietest intervals do correspond to relationship with the wind speed. And again, if we assume that a wind energy project is built here in Riga, and that there's a 45 decibel limit at the non-participating occupied structures, then the maximum sound level is represented by these dots. The expected maximum will be about 2 decibels less because we built in a safety margin, and the actual sound levels at any given time corresponding to these wind speeds will be along a line that goes below these dots. So what these graphs show you is that the maximum sound levels are comparable to the existing quietest interval sound levels today in Riga. And just to go back to the first station here, it's a little easier to see the colored dots here. These are the average sound levels that you hear today. The maximum sound levels from the wind turbine will be significantly below the average sound levels most hours. Those are the studies that we have completed so far. The next step in the project is going to be to use an acoustic model to guide the turbine layout on participants' land. And of course, that's also going to be depending upon the final sound limits that are in the ordinance, both here in Riga and in the other townships. The modeling approach that we use accurately predicts maximum sound levels. It uses an international standard called ISO 9613. We assume maximum sound power in a frozen ground condition. And I want to present some information from 2 validation studies that we've done for the acoustic model that confirm that the ISO model is accurate for wind turbines. First, in Cohocton, New York, which is an 88 megawatt existing wind project. Model predictions for that project were done by another consultant, David Hessler. Our firm did 8 rounds of compliance tests for the town of Cohocton over a year's period. We found that on average, the model over-predicted the maximum measured level by 0.4 of a decibel. The statistical variance was plus or minus 2 decibels, caused by the variation in background sound levels. A second example is an existing 100 megawatt project in a rural area here in the Midwest. And the data come to us from an article in Sound and Vibration Journal by Mr. Ken Kaliski. And the use of the ISO model with a frozen ground surface, as I presented here, produced the best fit to the measurements of the maximum sound levels from that wind farm. In fact, the maximum measured sound, the model over-predicted the maximum measured sound by 0. So on average, it exactly matched it with a statistical variation of plus or minus 2 decibels, again related to non-turbine sound sources. So for this project, this is the approach we're going to be taking. The ISO model, assuming a temperature inversion condition, which ensures that you have maximum sound propagation. All the turbines are on simultaneously. They're all running at maximum sound power. There is no wind shadow effect. What that means is we assume that any given property is downwind of every turbine at the same time, which in fact is impossible because if there was a turbine to the west and there was one to the east, and the wind was blowing from one of those directions, you couldn't be downwind of both of them at the the same time. But the model assumes that. A winter frozen ground, which is semi-reflective, and then probably the most important part of the set of assumptions is the assumption of a 2 decibel uncertainty factor that many other consultants don't include, and we add for a safety margin. Now I'd like to turn my attention to the issue of low frequency sound and also infrasound. All sound sources produce some amount of low frequency sound. That includes my voice that you are hearing right now. It includes car and truck traffic, farm equipment, wind noise on a windy day. Indoors it includes refrigerators, household appliances, air conditioners, televisions. We all hear low frequency sound day in and day out. Most of the audible turbine sound is in the mid-frequency range. The swish-swish of the blade that you hear if you're very close to a wind turbine. Now some have mischaracterized that as low frequency sound because the swish sound occurs on a period of about once per second. But that is simply a variation in what's really a mid-frequency sound. The prediction and measurement of wind turbine sound that we do in these types of studies includes all of the low-frequency sound. I want to make that point because people think, oh, this is something separate that you haven't thought of or considered. No, the prediction of and the measurement of wind turbine sound on the A-weighted scale, which is the proper scale, it mimics the way we hear sound in the low range that wind turbines produce, includes low-frequency sound. The lowest frequency audible sound is infrasound in the 16 hertz band. And generally infrasound is everything from that point lower in terms of its frequency. 16 hertz means the sound wave is vibrating at 16 cycles per second. For comparison, that lowest key on your piano at home, that's 28 hertz. So what would 16 hertz sound like if you could generate it? Well, if you had another octave to the left on your piano, and you go down one more octave and you could hit that key really hard, that would be around 16 hertz. So what about low frequency sound in wind turbines? Well, first let's establish that the infrasound, the lowest frequency sound, is always present in the natural environment, from air turbulence, motor vehicle traffic, and distant aircraft. And at the hub wind speed for full power operation of a wind turbine, this natural infrasound is somewhere around 20 to 30 decibels below the human hearing threshold. So you don't hear the infrasound that's generated by natural air turbulence on a windy day, but it is out there. From measurements that we have taken for 2 different projects in Michigan and throughout the northeastern United States, we generally find that the natural infrasound is about 20 to 30 decibels below the human hearing threshold. The infrasound produced by a wind turbine is in the same range as the natural background infrasound. It's not significant. It's about 20 to 30 decibels below the hearing threshold when the winds are at that 23 mile per hour speed that would correspond to the maximum production of energy. So the Blissfield wind energy infrasound, small as it may be, will be inaudible. It will not be audible. A noted acoustic scientist and expert on infrasound, Dr. Jeff Leventhal, has stated that infrasound is insignificant for wind turbines. It is indistinguishable from natural background infrasound levels, and that's because it's comparable in size. And, quote, no evidence that infrasound below the hearing threshold has any adverse effect on the human body. I'm sure you're aware that there are claims by opponents that turbine, low-frequency sound, and infrasound causes adverse health effects. If you trace those claims back to articles by Pierpont and others, you find that they reference sound impact studies that were done by NASA back in the 1960s. And in those studies, men were exposed to 110 to 150 decibels of infrasound. They did that by standing next to a jet engine. Okay. That's 100 million times more sound energy in the infrasound range than a wind turbine would produce. So, reports that some of those men became dizzy, disoriented, are not surprising. They were standing next to a jet engine for a long period of time. That type of information is not not comparable to the very small amount of infrasound that you would receive from a wind turbine, which is really indistinguishable from the natural background. We believe that a 45 decibel limit at non-participating occupied structures, day and night, is the appropriate limit for a wind energy project. The EPA residential noise guidelines recommend that in residential areas, rural farmlands, or other areas where, quote, quiet is a basis for use, that average sound levels be limited to 55 during the day and 45 at night to prevent annoyance and sleep disturbance. The World Health Organization in 1999 issued community noise guidelines. In that document, they stated, quote, at night, outside sound levels should not exceed 45 decibels, LEQ, that means on average, so people can sleep with their bedroom windows open. Recently issued night noise guidelines for Europe reaffirm and extend the 1999 guidelines, and they add a complementary annual average goal of 40 decibels for European countries. And I emphasize the annual average. Opponents often misinterpret this document. They quote text from the document that changes in sleep patterns or awakening may occur at levels of 35 to 42 decibels. But if you look closely in the document, you'll see that those numbers refer to sound levels inside a bedroom, not outdoors of a house. And there's a substantial difference between sound levels inside and outside of a house. The World Health Organization recognizes that outdoor sound levels are quite variable, and thus an annual average guideline of 40 decibel implies that hourly levels are going to be both higher and lower. An annual average goal of 40 is actually equivalent to an hourly limit of 45 decibels or higher for wind turbines. Wind turbines only operate at their maximum power a fraction of the time. And a turbine will be upwind of a property approximately only half of the time because winds blow from different directions. An analysis we did of meteorological data here in Michigan reveals that an annual average goal, if you were to adopt the annual average goal from the guideline for European countries, would correspond to a maximum limit for wind turbines of at least 45 decibels. So in terms of sound level guidelines, a 45 decibel limit at non-participating occupied structures, day and night, is both appropriate and health protective as a limit. A lower limit is unreasonable, and it would prohibit wind energy development here in Riga Township. And I thank you for your attention. attention.